Do you remember SimCity? I do. I have a massive nostalgia for it. It was such an amazing game. I used to play that game all the time as a kid. The first one I ever played was SimCity 3000. I remember having tons of fun with that game, although as a small child I was not that good at it. Usually I would do somehow well with a starter town scenario with a city that's already partially built. Just have fun around building new things, expanding the town, growing it. I remember I would always build schools next to the landfill. I thought it was funny. The best part is, once you were done with everything, you would just use the disaster button to make an earthquake, call UFOs, tornadoes, start fire, and just start fires all over the place. That part was always the most fun. However, I was not that good at the actual game, so I would often just run out of money. And I remember my nuclear power plant blew up and I had no idea what to do. I couldn't do anything about it. But anyway, once I got a bit older, I did start to understand the mechanics a bit and got into the actual city building of it. That part was actually handled really well, and I really like the details of managing a city. This is when the game actually really gets fun. First, I have to mention the creative freedom that the game gives you. On one hand, the game provides you with starter towns. These can be usually partially built or even completed, and they make the game easier, basically by giving you some base that you build upon, a steady source of income. It just makes the game easier. However, you can also build a completely new city from scratch. The game gives you complete control over the terrain if you decide to do so. Do you want a river? You want a lake in the middle, flat terrain? Do you want a mountain? The game gives it all basically. You select the size of the map, the terrain you want, you can use the editor to play around with it and edit the details as much as you would like. The game is actually completely 2D. Basically everything takes place on a two-dimensional field with all graphics being 2D sprites. And this actually plays to a big advantage here, especially in terms of aging. So the game still looks good, even exactly because the 2D sprites are actually quite high quality. So they age better than 3D graphics that games from that era use, which just look pretty horrible today. This actually also helps with the freedom aspect. I don't know how to describe it, but basically it makes it really simple and very clear where something can be built or it can't. Everything just sort of fits together very neatly. Elevation is easy to edit, it's simple to understand, and it just makes everything look pretty good. It's just so much easier in the newer 3D games, such as I remember how much of a bother it was to adjust the elevation in SimCity 4. That could be quite tiresome, and if you didn't do it completely well, the road would be just sort of wobbly, and the same with the railroad, and it always just annoyed me so much that it didn't look perfectly narrow and straight. Alright, now as far as the game goes, once we are done editing the terrain, we press the play button and there we go. We can start building the new town now. The ticker on the bottom will tell you that your town needs power. Assuming we started at an earlier date, we will have to stick with a coal power plant for now. It's dirty, but it will do for now. We lay down some roads, we add some zoning, we give them power, and houses will pop out. The game gives you a position of what they call a mayor, but there's no term limit, and you have complete control over the budget, policy, and infrastructure building. However, you cannot force people to live in your town, nor can you force businesses and shops to set up their businesses there. Although you can do the opposite. You can freely demolish any private building, any factory you would like to make space for something new, let's say a stadium, for example. So the goal of the game is basically for you to provide the infrastructure that allows the town to grow. Once you set up the roads, once you give them water, once you provide schools and hospital, proper conditions will be met and the city will be able to grow. Basic infrastructure will allow factories to open. However, once you provide them with higher education, the higher sector can arrive. This means that to grow and advance forward, you need to adjust what you build. and your tax policy accordingly. The gameplay is basically the mix of creativity, laying down the city in a way just the way you would like to, and it's also a mix of figuring out the right policies in order to be able to build what you want to build. So balancing this can be a little bit hard once you are a newcomer, and in the early phase of the game your funds are very limited, so we can provide only so many schools and only so many hospitals, so you have to spend your money very carefully. But it's not as hard as you might think when I'm talking about it like that. The game will basically provide you with advisors, and when you're going to be in doubt about your, let's say you don't know if you have proper residential tax, you just ask them and they will tell you whether you should raise it or lower it. And in general, their advice is pretty accurate, so you can follow it if you're in doubt. There's also this sticker on the bottom of the screen, and it will also warn you if you're doing something wrong or you need to change something, or it's going to say if you're doing something right, so that's neat as well. So it's always some sort of a notification that tells you if you're doing something right or wrong and what's going on, basically. This sticker, it's a very unique thing to this installment. I'm not sure if any other SimCity games have it, at least not in the same way. But basically you have this text which is always moving on the bottom of the screen, and it gives you either a warning, a notification, or a hint, or an advice, or even a joke sometimes, or it can also be just nonsense. I really like this part of the game. The ticker will keep you up to date with whatever is going on. For example, the water is polluted, you're going to get a message there. Maybe there's gonna be traffic problems, you're gonna get a message there. The ticker will always provide you with feedback. So it's a convenient way for the game to tell you what's going on without having any sort of pop-out which would stop you from playing the game and breaking the flow of the game that you're going through. And it also provides some entertainment at the same time, and it also helps with the mood of the game. Together with the jazz soundtrack and the way it looks, it helps to give the atmosphere, and all around I think it's great. So, what's the goal of this game, SimCity 3000? Well, there isn't any. You can do whatever you want. Earlier, I spoke of advancing society with high-tech industry, but you don't have to do that. You can try to create a rural farmland area, for example, or you can just go for a slum, which means that you just build dirty industry and landfills everywhere and you don't care about pollution or anything. You can do it for that. Basically, you do whatever you want. The game doesn't tell you what to do. You don't actually have an objective, and the game will also pretty much never end. Although most players will naturally find themselves wanting to progress the city to its best size and best conditions possible, meaning that you want to reduce crime, you want to increase land value, increase education, and reduce pollution as much as possible. Doing that will also give you very high revenue, and the high revenue money that you get will give you the funds to shape the city pretty much however you would like to. So maybe that's really like the final goal of SimCity 3000 is getting to that level of advancement where you can pretty much afford to do whatever you want, so you have full creative freedom over the game. Okay, so thinking about the game, and something that I really appreciated over the years is the sort of a lection on society it gives you. For example, like, there's still many people against affordable education, having public transit, they think it's something bad, or reducing pollution for some reason. And to some reason it's understandable, because humans have primal survival instincts that we care about. Obviously everyone cares about themselves first, because in order for a human to live, one has to survive, and then we can go on. So for example, you can understand how somebody would be against having higher taxes to pay someone else's education, or having to recycle, because again it's a bother, it takes more time to do so. But the position that the game puts you in, it sort of gives you the big picture perspective. So not just about how you feel as for recycling as you, the individual, but sort of like the big picture, city-wide, effect that this policy has on the city as a whole. So for example, you will increase your taxes in the game to pay for higher education, but it's going to pay off eventually because you will have highly educated people and you will be able to invite more profitable sectors, and in the long term they will make more money for everyone. Everyone is going to be better off. Of course, a car will always be a more comfortable form of transportation as a bus, but objectively speaking, having good mass transit will reduce traffic in your city. Pollution is going to be lower. You are going to have more spaces for, let's say, public parks. The quality of air will be better. People will be healthier. Their health will be better. It's going to reduce the budget you need for healthcare, for example. So, I really like that, and it's the same with recycling, you know, it's a bit of a bother maybe to you to recycle, but in the game, it's going to save you very precious space, because you will need less space for landfills, and again, it's something of a good thing you get for your city. You can also choose city policy with sort of a selection of ordinances. Again, here you will have to juggle between having being financially stable enough to afford them, the public opinion that people will have, and the benefit that these ordinances give you. Let me give you an example. You can have homeless shelters. This will be costly at first, but it will improve well-being of everyone. Homeless people have a space to stay at, and the streets will be cleaner because people are not living on them literally. You might get some complaints about some citizens that it's too costly, but at the end of the day it's up to you to decide. You can ask the advisor and they will give you a pretty safe answer whether it's worth it or not. Okay, so maybe like a thing I really liked SimCity series and this game really does is the way how the game treats crime. The most obvious way to fight crime, obviously, is to just build police stations everywhere, prisons, and then raise the police budget to maximum. That's the most intuitive way to deal with crime. However, it's not the best way to fight crime, because the problem with high police budget is that eventually police will become tyrannical because they just have too much time and too much money, so they will start to oppress people for petty crimes, such as putting chewing gum under the chairs and singing off tune, as they say in the game. This is an example where the advisor, who herself is a police officer, will defend this and say it's a good thing for the city. I can't help here but to make parallels with USA, where militarized police is being used as a solution for very high crime, but we can see that simply there's a lot of problems with it. This by itself is not a solution. To really reduce crimes, you need to look at other factors as well. You have to treat society in your game as a whole, so maybe increase education to give people better employment, improve general well-being in the city, and it's also going to reduce crime because people will be happier, they will have less problems. If they're not as poor, they won't have to resort to crime, and that's also something that you need to do if you want a town with a very little crime. So I think that in this way, the game ends up having a rather positive educative effect on the player, which I think it's somehow of a good thing. I thought about it quite a lot, but most of the games that I used to play, and I still do play, they tend to feature some sort of war, fighting, or violence. I sometimes wondered why it's that. Why are most games about fighting? Why are most games about war? I don't know, maybe it's just a natural way to have fast-paced, exciting gameplay. So I suppose that's something out of the ordinary that doesn't happen in everyday life. I don't know for sure, but I think that this definitely makes SimCity a very nice exception to have. It's nice to have a game that focuses on something that's not fighting. I think it's also a great way to release some creativity. When you're building a city, you can be creative and you can just have fun with it. You can do with it whatever you want. I really appreciate the, how could I say, open box feature of it. That it gives you freedom to do just whatever you want. Whatever size of the game you want. Do you want big? Do you want small? Like that's the best part about it. It's this freedom that it gives you. Maybe the last thing I would mention is the Unlimited Edition. This version of the game that came a bit later It features some new buildings, some new skins for the buildings, and also it actually gives you scenarios that have goals that you're supposed to reach. So this makes it a little bit more like a traditional game that you can beat. I think it's a great add-on to the original game. Really, life used to be so much easier. All you have is SimCity 3000, and then a few years later SimCity Unlimited comes out. That's all you need. Today it's like the base game, and then there's thousands of DLCs and add-ons, and there's, I don't know, season passes. I don't even know what that is. To me it's just off-putting. Then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna wait for the package. I'm not gonna play the game, and when the package comes out I lose the interest in the game anyway, so then I don't play it at all. Anyway, whatever. SimCity 3000 is a good game. Check it out. Also subscribe. No, SimScribe.